everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Power to the People, Georgia Energy Decisions that shape your wallet, health, and future. Thank you for joining us tonight as we come together to discuss a challenge that is ahead of us, but also an opportunity that is waiting on us and facing all of Georgia communities. This is the power for us to be able to hold right now and to drive meaningful change. My name is Jasmine Gill, and I'm honored to host this important conversation tonight. Some housekeeping rules and run of show just for you to have in advance. This event is being recorded and we are streaming live. Tonight, we'll meet our panelists and those behind these important pieces of work that's been doing it for years and can let you know how to get involved. We'll also dive into the discussion around the major topic that is in front of us, as well as take your questions. So please use the Q&A feature to drop your questions for us, and we'll get to them at the end of the program. And then we'll close with action items and how you can stay plugged in. With that, I want to introduce our amazing panelists tonight. The first is artist 2AM Ricky. 2AM Ricky is an award-winning recording artist, storyteller, and advocate for shifting culture through music and movement. As the first Black trans man to chart on iTunes and a Forbes BLK history maker, his work fuses Southern roots, futuristic bounce, and emotional raw storytelling. But beyond the music, Ricky serves as the Chief Marketing Officer for the VDOM, a pioneering brand in sexual wellness and reproductive health, and advocates for national trans visibility, mental health, and community-centered issues. Next up, we have Andrea Young-Jones, who is the Government Relations and Public Policy Director for Georgia WAND, where she leads advocacy for environmental justice, climate action, and public health, with a focus on communities most impacted by pollution and industrial development. With a background in public policy, civil rights, and executive leadership, she has overseen successful campaigns promoting anti-discrimination legislation and environmental protections, and has managed regulatory enforcement on fair housing and civil rights laws. Andrea has authorized and lobbied for the legislature to address the cumulative health and economic impacts of pollution and overburdened Georgia communities across party lines, and to improve our transparency and consumer advocacy and public utilities regulations. Her work is grounded in the belief that environmental justice is a statewide and national concern, requiring solutions that address the interconnected effects of environmental, socioeconomic, and health stressors across rural and urban areas. And then we have Cody Nord, who is the Executive Director of Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, where he leads the efforts to mobilize faith communities across Georgia for climate action, environmental justice, clean energy policy at all levels of the government. With nearly a decade of experience in environmental justice and sustainability, Cody has developed and managed programs such as Green Teams and Practical Solutions focused on climate, and has played a key role in advancing JIPL's policy and educational initiatives. He serves on multiple regional and national boards and committees focused on climate, energy, and faith-based advocacy, and was appointed to Atlanta's Clean Energy Advisory Board in 2023. Cody's expertise has also included international work that links the environmental degradation work to conflict, as well as holding a Master in Divinity from Emory University. And then lastly, you have myself, Jasmine Gill. I help lead the climate and environmental justice work at the Hip Hop Caucus. We are a 20-year-old organization that has been working for the past 2 decades to combine works across climate, environmental justice, voting democracy, economic justice, as well as civil rights, to things like activism, culture, and change combined. I have dedicated my career to this work, and that's why I'm so excited to bring forth the conversation of something that I know that is impacting every single Georgia right now, and the reason why it's important for you to tune in tonight. So thank you for being here and lending your time. Again, tonight we're going to focus on that empowerment, driving the change in this fight for equity, health, our wallets, and our safety in Georgia. First, for tonight's discussion, I want to focus on 2 things. One is called the PSC. And if you don't know what that acronym stands for, it is the Public Service Commission. And then the second thing I want to start our conversation with is the IRP. I know y'all, a lot of acronyms to remember, but the IRP stands for the Integrated Resource Plan. It is very, very important that you walk away with those 2 acronyms, who they are, what they mean, and how it impacts you. So first, Andrea, if you were in an elevator right now with a Georgian resident and you only had 2 minutes to tell them who the Public Service Commission was, how it impacts them, what would you say?
Okay, well, the first thing is what you talked about, what you mentioned about the Public Service Commission, stands for, that's the PSC, as you mentioned, and then you also have the IRP, which the Public Service Commission oversees to Georgia Power. But I will let them know that the Public Service Commission consists of 5 elected officials who regulate the services provided by an investor-owned telecommunications, natural gas, and electric utilities, such as Atlantic Gas and Light and Georgia Power. So these are investor-owned companies, and they in Georgia. I'm going in and out, right? I'm sorry. Can you all hear me?
That's all right, Andrea. You're doing well.
All right, I'll keep going. The mission of the Public Service Commission is to exercise. Okay, sorry. The mission of the Public Service Commission is that it exercises authority to influence how these companies basically charge you for their services, right? So they regulate the prices and the rates of these services. Now, to give you a background, the Public Service Commission was established in the early 1900s. It was the Railroad Commission at first, and then the name changed when it expanded to look at energy services. And in 1922, the Georgia legislature changed it to Public Service Commission so we could understand exactly all the things that it was supposed to do. So it also looks at the railroad. It looks at telecommunications, it looks at gas, and it looks at energy. So it regulates those types of industries to ensure that the people who use it are getting fair and reasonable rates, and they are getting a quality service. So when you look at how the Public Service Commission operates, how it affects us, it affects our wallets and impacts our bottom line. Because what it does is it basically works with the utility to ensure that they are providing us the rates at a reasonable cost. Not only that the utility it's in the law that the utility can earn a profit, but the Public Service Commission is supposed to be that entity that ensures that they are not price gouging the residents of Georgia or wherever utility types tell them. Also, Georgia Power, in terms of how Georgia Power impacts us, Georgia Power has experienced an unprecedented 30% increase in bills for Georgia Power customers, which has increased Georgia Power's profits astronomically beyond the national average. So the PSC has a duty to ensure that not only do they make sure Georgia Power remains a national average, but they make sure that the people of Georgia are not put into a position where they feel that they have been exploited, and they feel that they have not been able to get the services that they are provided to make their lives better and more manageable.
Thanks, Andrea. So if y'all didn't peep that, Andrea actually brought forth another component for us to consider here, which is Georgia Power being one of the main other bodies here, in addition to the Public Service Commission. Now, to connect the two, the Public Service Commission is supposed to be the checks and balances, right, Andrea, for Georgia Power? Georgia Power managing much of the state's utility regulations. The Public Service Commission is supposed to be there to make sure that decisions are being made equitably, that those decisions are not only fair, but also cost effective for consumers, because Georgia Power is privately owned. Is that correct, Andrea? Do I have that right? I think we might have a lag with Andrea, but that's okay. I hope I connect the dots for you two there. In the meantime, I want to move on to the Integrated Resource Plan, the other acronym that I asked y'all to remember, the IRP. Cody, if you were in the elevator right now with a Georgia resident and you only had 2 minutes to explain to them this kind of top part that Andrea mentioned to us, the PSC, what is the PSC in the Public Service Commission? What do they have to do with an IRP? What is an IRP, and why is it important for folks to know about?
So many good questions for 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. As Andrea said, the 5-member elected Public Service Commission is to regulate Georgia Power and the decisions that they make and how much they charge ratepayers for those decisions. One of the primary ways that they do that is through what's called an IRP, or the Integrated Resource Plan. Now, this happens at least every 3 years, but Georgia Power brings forward a plan to the Public Service Commission that essentially predicts, here's everything that we're going to need over the next 30 years to serve all of the electricity and energy needs in Georgia so far as we can predict it, right? That's kind of what the process is for. In this particular IRP, what you're seeing is an almost unheard of amount of coal and natural gas being proposed to fill that need. So we're seeing a lot of need driven by an increase in data centers. And the way that we're meeting that need is by kicking out coal retirements by 10 years and by doubling possibly the amount of natural gas on the grid to meet that need. So it's not only that implementing those things are going to cost people money. After the IRP, there's something called a rate case. And the way to distinguish between the IRP and the rate case very quickly is the IRP is the place where Georgia Power says, here's the stuff that we need. We need more coal-fired power plants. We need more natural gas to meet our load growth. And the rate case, which comes after it, is a way that they decide who's going to pay for that. And typically, that burden lies on bill payers. We're going to pay for that. And so not only is it that we're increasing coal and natural gas that's going to further impact our communities, but it's going to raise our bills, as Andrea said. After just the last couple of years, we're seeing our 6th, 7th rate increases totaling between $40 to $50 a month extra on people's bills. And people are paying for coal and natural gas.
Thanks for that, Cody. Yeah, and so what we have here is really two worlds colliding, right? This body of people that are supposed to be making decisions that are on the best behalf of Georgia residents, but then a plan being presented to them that is anything but that, in a previous history of this body choosing to go the route that leads us more towards really what it is fossil fuel dependency. You talked about the coal plants not shutting down. For those who don't know, within the next year or so, those two specific coal plants, Plant Bowen, Plant Sharon, are supposed to be closing down. And then this plan would, as Cody said, exceed that. Most of this plan is dependent on natural gas. And I know when you hear the words natural, you think, oh my God, it's good. It is not. Natural gas is mostly composed of methane. Methane is 80% times potent than any other greenhouse gas emission. So no matter which way we look at it, right, we're talking about a plan here, as Cody mentioned, that has decades of implications for the state of Georgia. And with that being said, these decisions leading directly to those things, these things impact our health. Ricky, you have done so much work in the community on health issues. For you as a Georgia resident, but also as an artivist in this space, what concerns you the most about these decisions that are coming towards the Public Service Commission around this integrated resource plan? And then how should we be assessing this? How should we be looking at this as Georgia residents?
I think that, simply put, environmental justice is mental health care. Environmental justice is reproductive justice. It is wellness. Because if the air we breathe and the bills we're paying are making us stressed out and it's making us sick, then we don't have a climate care issue. A climate issue, we have a care issue, right? When we're looking at the pollution in the industrial sites that you're mentioning, a lot of these are being linked to higher miscarriage rates, higher birth defects, hormonal disruption. And a lot of times it's our marginalized communities, our Black folk, our brown folk, our queer folk, our trans folk who are living near these sites the most, right? These are the same communities that are already navigating barriers in healthcare, who are now dealing with not being able to pay their bills. So they might not be able to get the medical treatment that they're needing. Bad air, bad toxins in their water, as well as rising energy costs. So it's creating a storm that's not only affecting them financially, it's now affecting them physically.
Perfect analogy, Ricky. A storm, right? When a storm hits, it might impact your power. Your power may shut off, right? It's going to impact your activity in your home that day. We're not going to go out driving out and about during the storm, right? It's going to impact everything that's happening around you. And so it's really deeper than health. So I really want to dig a little bit more into that impact. Andrea, Georgia One focuses on environmental and economic justice, particularly in communities of color and those near pollution sources. Ricky kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit more how this current plan for Georgia Energy and the decisions that are forthcoming by the Public Service Commission, how they will disproportionately affect frontline communities and what policies would you recommend, or things that would you recommend for the Public Service Commission to really assess and fight for the Georgia communities?
Ricky is absolutely right in terms of looking at environmental justice, because environmental justice is about public health. One of the things that we look at is in terms of Georgia WAN is that we look at how energy burden impacts people's in terms of their public health. Having lack of energy in terms of cooling or heating your home can be a health hazard, right? Also, in terms of your proximity to these types of facilities, especially in the CSRA areas, the Central Savannah River areas of Georgia, which are areas that have a high percentage of pollution, but also where Plant Vogtle is, right? Where the nuclear reactor is in Waynesboro. They just constructed two new nuclear reactors in that area, where you also have another nuclear site, waste site, which is the SRS. So you have those communities that are being impacted by radiation in terms of nuclear energy. But then also Georgia, in terms of the IRP, Georgia Power is actually looking at probably increasing its amount of nuclear energy output, which could further burden those areas. Also, you're looking at in terms of the amount of money that came into being for the nuclear reactors, which is $36 billion, which Georgia Power customers are paying, and also everyone will eventually pay, because since Georgia Power is a monopoly, every other industry in terms of energy gets their source from Georgia Power. So Georgia Power is getting sourcing other EMCs and other types of energy types of companies. Georgia Power blocks solar power. In terms of Georgia, there was a community solar bill that came up in the state, and Georgia Power has blocked that. So looking at some types of remedies that we can look at for reforms and solutions that we can do, we can help with bill paying. 200 people are turned off, 200 homes are turned off every year in Georgia Power in terms of them not being able to pay their bills. Georgia Power is, of course, Georgia is an energy burden state. So we're looking at people who are low income, who are already suffering from other types of issues that are coming in, health, financial, education, everything that comes into play that makes it the quality of life people are burdened from. And then you have this other added burden in terms of not being able to power their homes. We need to look at expanding energy efficiency and weatherization, utilities generating power from affordable renewable energy in terms of solar power, like I said, or wind, and then making rooftop solar affordable. The PSC can create this. Georgia Power can do this on their own, but the PSC can move them, influence them to do that. They are supposed to be their guide, and that integrated resource plan is that source to do that. They don't have to approve it, or they can tell them to go back to the drawing board. Another thing that we can do, that's one thing that Georgia Power can do, but what the state legislature can do, so that we recommend, is that the PSC name change to the Public Utility Commission. That will allow, I believe, Georgians to understand exactly what it is that the public service community does. The public service, a service is broad, but if you hear public utility, then you know immediately what that is. That is telecommunications, that is energy, that is gas, that is anything that deals with utilities. Then we want to establish a consumer utility council to be at the PSC that will be an advocate for consumers to ensure that Georgia Power customers, but all energy customers, are getting a fair deal. Then we want to be able to have people's data available to them. Georgia Power is very greedy. It does not allow people to get their data. If you have your energy data in terms of your usage data, then you will be able to actively resource and go out there and see what other types of opportunities are out there for different types of energy source. If you want to do solar, if you want to do, if you want to do hybrid, whatever it is that you want to do, that energy data belongs to you. And we also want to disallow donations from people or from corporations to go to PSC commissioners in elections. One such thing that has happened in terms of the railroad, the Sanderson Railroad went to the PSC to ask them to acquire more land in rural Georgia in Hancock County. And the PSC has approved eminent domain and taking private land to give to a private company, land that has been in the homes of residents in that area for over 100 years, and they're taking that land to expand that railroad. And the PSC voted for that. So those are the types of things when you look at in terms of what type of people do we want making those decisions on the PSC. And then we probably want to restructure how Georgia Power is compensated. One way that Georgia Power is compensated is that the more they build out, the more money they make. They make profit from what they build out. But if they could make profit from the types of programs and policies they have to make our lives better, which is called a performance-based plan, then that will help them. That will help maybe consumers have a better available product, and that will allow us to be able to reduce the cost of our energy bills. So I hope I answered those questions.
Oh, you did. Honestly, you just already laid out the plan that honestly the PSC just needs to follow at this point. So to that piece, not sure if you have anything additional to add here, Cody, but knowing that a lot of your work has focused around the integrated resource plan and some of these suggestions that Andrea is proposing that the PSC to consider, a lot of those hone in on the benefit to everyday residents. And I'm wondering, as far as larger groups, right? Georgia Interfaith Power and Light focusing on the faith-based community, congregations, and seeing how they've been impacted by rising energy costs. When I think about businesses, when I think about just larger groups of people that could benefit from some of these things, do you have any additional thoughts around what an integrated resource plan really should be considering, or could be in addition to when we think about larger groups outside of our everyday residents?
Yes, a really good question. I mean, to get back to something that Ricky was talking about earlier, I mean, I think the focus has to be on impacted communities. I mean, essentially, what this process does is continue to burden the communities and individuals and congregations that are already burdened, right? So if you think about coal and natural gas plants, what that means is that the burning of that energy is going into the lungs of kids and people that live around those areas. So it's not just, it's creating dirty energy that we're breathing in. So as those communities breathe in that energy, their energy also costs more. So they're paying more. They're paying $600 a year more, roughly. I don't know a lot of people who just want to give that to their utility company so that they can continue to receive dirty energy. But not only that, I mean, we hear a lot about how Georgia is the best place to do business, and that's the reason why we want to build all this energy. Georgia doesn't make any coal. We don't make any natural gas. So what that means is we've got to truck it in, we've got to train it in, we've got to build pipelines through communities to get it here. So also just to get the resources to burn here, to poison people and to charge them more for it, we have to drive coal through communities and get dust in those communities. We've got to ram pipelines through the Southeast to bring that stuff here and devastate communities. So all of that stuff is devastating, one on top of the other. And I think our work with congregations, especially, you know, something that we advocate for is the more that congregations, community organizations, and nonprofits can avoid in paying in their bill costs, that's money that goes directly back into communities. That's food pantries, that's backpack programs, yes, that's after school programs. So the more that we increase people's bills, the less of those programs that we're going to have, because ultimately these prices go up on people's homes. But then they go from their home to a school. Well, that school's bill is going up. And then they leave that school and they're going to go to church. Well, that church's bill is going up. So for communities, they're really bearing this cost 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and all the places that are pieces of community infrastructure that we depend on. It's not just that our residential bills are going up. Everybody's bills, every single place that they care about is going up, which means that less and less of those community benefits that nonprofits and congregations are doing is going to be possible moving forward. The need is going to increase and the ability to do it is going to decrease. And Andrea talked about energy burden. You know, just really quickly, reminder for everybody, energy burden talks about the after-tax income, what percentage of that income a household pays on their electricity costs, their transportation costs, and their gas costs. Just electricity alone, Georgia has places that are 4 times, 5 times the national average. You know, we think about 3%, 4% as the average energy burden for a household, but we have places in Atlanta and across Georgia that are paying 11, 12, 13, 14% of their after-tax income just on electricity alone, not including transportation or gas. So those impacts are devastating. That's going to create more shutoffs, especially as the summer ramps up here. I mean, that's what we can expect.
So greatly said, Cody, given that bird's eye view of how it's really, really impacting everyone across the entire state. And I know there's a misperception here that if you're not a Georgia Power resident, that it doesn't impact you. That is absolutely not true. This impacts the entire state. And so when I think about Georgia, the Peach State, Ricky, I think about the fact that Georgia is probably one of the most impactful and influential places in the nation, we talk about art, music, history. Georgia is stamped and solidified and being able to have that marker of being such an influential place. And we know that it's really culture. It's often Black culture that is the heart of that sort of successful movement building as well. As someone that's breaking barriers in that space, how would you encourage folks to like plug in this moment around why this is so important to them as a resident of one of the most influential spaces in the world?
I mean, we know that culture moves before policy does, right? And so, if being with that being said, if your grandma bills are too high, then and you're an artist, that's a verse, right? If your neighbor is sick because of mold or bad air, now that's a story. You know what I'm saying? If everyone around you is dealing with not being able to pay bills, you don't know how you're going to get food on your table for your kids because your power bill is so high. That's a conversation. And so I think that taking what feels like a little bit to us and understanding how big of an impact it is what's going to shift that. From a music standpoint, I walk around with a microphone in my hand, right? But that microphone is not just for music. That microphone has the power to call out an injustice and call in community. And I think in a world that, you're right, it is a very Black state. It is, and we do shift culture a lot. We have our cameras, we have our phones, we have all these other things that we utilize to shift that culture. We should shift it towards intentional conversations like these that matter.
Thank you, Ricky. And speaking of that shift, I want to shift our conversation to the solutions, where people can get activated, where we need to start moving towards, and what we can do. The main thing here is, ironically, this is actually the year for the Public Service Commission. Some seats are up for election, Andrea. And I want you to tell the folks more about that upcoming election, what it means, and how can they be effective in this moment. Andrea, I think you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. As I mentioned before, the PSC is run by 5 commissioners. They are elected statewide, and there's a misnomer. There's belief that the commissioners represent particular districts, and that those districts are basically and those commissioners are beholden to that particular area. That is not the case. The commissioners need to reside from that district or have property in that district, but they are elected statewide. So when you hear that you have District 2 and District 3 that are coming up on November ballot this particular election season, everyone is going to vote for those positions. And so the people who are running, some are running from Savannah, some are running from Georgia, from Savannah and from other parts of Georgia, like in Atlanta or Cobb County, everyone will vote for that person. So that's what makes it extremely important. And we want to make sure people understand that. Another thing we want also to understand is that the PSC elections have not happened in the last, I would say, 4 to 6 years. And Cody can echo me on this. The PSC elections were in 2024 in the 2024 election. And so because of that, you have commissioners that have been on the commission longer than the Georgia Constitution calls for, but then also they had not been held accountable for some of the decisions that have been made. So this is an opportunity for us to really address the issues that are concerning us with the PSC in terms of the cost of energy, with the direction that we would really want the PSC to go to, and all of our energy providers to go to in terms of renewable energy, but then also to ensure that the people who questions that go to our bottom line. What are you going to do to address high energy costs? What are you going to do to move us into the 21st century in terms of renewable energy? What are you, the PSC is fair and a fair arbiter in terms of regulating the types of utilities that are happening in Georgia, from the railroad to telecommunications. I know the primary is in July No, the primary is June the 17th. That is for both Commission Districts 2 and District 3. And the general election is November the 4th. And we need people to get out there and to engage and to vote and to ask questions of the PSC candidates, and to see this as an opportunity to begin to address what is happening around their energy bills. Because there's one thing to rail against Georgia Power. You can rail against them and be angry with them. Georgia Power cannot do that. Georgia Power could do certain things in order to lessen energy costs, but they won't, because they don't have to, because the regulatory body that is overseeing them is not making them. So then you have to go to the source, and the source is the PSC. And so that is one way. Voting is one way to address that.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, going straight to the source, right? Going straight to the decision makers who are putting us in these positions that are impacting our health, our wallets, our community. So doing that work of making sure you show up at the polls for both the primary and the general, to make sure that we have the appropriate representation in Georgia that we need, that are going to make sound decisions for our community. And there's also something else happening here, Cody, that people can plug into, not only just the elections, but at the same time, simultaneously, we are focusing in on the integrated resource plan. There are hearings happening. There's a whole process. Can you talk to people about the importance of that, what it means, and how they can be effective in that space?
For sure. I mean, just starting with the integrated resource plan, the thing that you need to know, the next set of hearings happens the last week of May, the 27th through the 30th. At the beginning of every single one of those hearings, there's going to open up a couple hours of public comment to come and give 3 minutes of public comment. The best thing that you can do is come and tell your story. Come and talk about how expensive your bills are. Come and talk about how much clean energy matters to you. Tell your own story and ask these commissioners to follow through and deliver for you and your families. That's the thing that you can do. You can call them anytime. Like Andrea said, you don't have one public service commissioner, you have 5. You have 5 public service commissioners. Each of them regulate Georgia Power on your behalf. So call them as often as you can. Pick up the phone and call them. They're all active on social media. Get on social media and tag them and ask your questions. Those are the most impactful things that you can do. Obviously, there are 2 seats open this year, Commissioner Eccles and Commissioner Johnson seats, Districts 2 and 3. Like Andrea said, you vote for every single one of those seats. So when they come up on the ballot, you vote all the way down the ballot. That's the best thing that you can do. But I would say, in addition to showing up at the integrated resource plan and voting, what you can do is talk about the Public Service Commission. This is the most important elected official position that no one's ever heard of. They serve 6-year terms. They're the only 5 people who can regulate Georgia Power to talk about what they put on the grid, what kind of resources, clean energy or fossil fuels, and how much your bill costs. These are the only 5 people who have anything to do about that. So talk about it at your kitchen table, talk about it at your church, talk about it at your kids' school games. Make sure people know what the Public Service Commission is, and that on June 17th there's a primary, on November 4th there's a statewide election, and you vote in every single one of those districts and vote your values.
Thank you, Cody. Yes, we need y'all to show up and in large amounts. I see a comment in the chat saying that your light bill was $345 this past month for your family of 3, right? That's $345 on top of rent or mortgage, on top of food, gas, miscellaneous things that you and your family need. Your story is powerful. People need to hear it. And so does everyone else who has that same exact story, right? We need to be showing up in numbers, showing the impact that this is really having on folks, and that the impact is being felt every single day. So with that being said too, Ricky, I know that you creating music, right, just makes you such an amazing and natural storyteller by default. What would you say to people listening to myself, Andrea, Cody, you right now, that may need that extra push, may feel a little bit timid to share their story and to show up in these spaces? What would you say to them to help them feel a little bit more encouraged, to make them feel a little bit more equipped?
I would say don't allow the system or what feels like lack of information or lack of education to gaslight or scare you into silence, right? You don't have to know every acronym. You don't have to know everything. You don't even have to know who are these 5 people. What do they look like? What their kids do? You don't have to know any of that information. Your story matters. Your power bill matters. Your wallet matters. Your family matters. And so remembering that and remembering that the PSC works for you and not the other way around is the most important step, in my opinion.
Exactly. Thank you, Ricky. You are the most powerful storyteller already. You're already the expert because you're dealing with the impacts every single day. You see it. You're breathing that air. You're living in your community. You know what should be acceptable for your community, what decisions should be made that are fair for you and your community and your families. And that's the way that we should be showing up in this moment. So thank you to the panelists for going through those kind of pre-planned questions and getting our audience talking through what this issue is really about and how it's impacting them on an everyday basis. I'm going to open it up for some Q&A. I already see one question populated from Nina. Nina says, where can we see candidate forums? Will any of your orgs host any before the primaries and general election? I'll open it up to the floor.
What a great question. I will just say
Georgia
yes.
Yeah, I know. She's right on top. Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say, I know that,
Do you want to go, Cody?
Andrea, you were about to say it. I know that Georgia Wand, GIPL, Georgia Conservation Voters, a whole team of other organizations will be teaming up to do these candidate forums. I'm not sure if any are happening before the primary. I know that they'll be happening before the general election. And when Jasmine was talking about what can you do, another thing that you can do is show up and ask candidates your questions. Ask them why your bill is too high. Ask folks, what are they going to do to bring down your bills? What are they going to do to implement clean energy? What are they going to do to hold Georgia Power accountable to their promises that they've made? I would say that's another place that you can ask the questions that you have and get them to answer you in front of a room full of your peers. And Andrea, I know you probably have more details about upcoming forums, but
you're absolutely right, Cody, about our organizations coming together to do something. We've been taught. We are talking in the process of doing that before the primary. I know Georgia League of Women Voters is planning on something sometime in May, but I'm not exactly sure. Also, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party might be planning some things too, some candidate forums or some just information about PSC if they are. So I encourage you, if you do have access or know anyone, or you can go online and see if anything is coming up in terms of the parties. The other thing is that you asked about ensuring that your power, but what to ask candidates. One thing that I want to make sure is, I know that not everyone is a Georgia Power customer. Jasmine, you mentioned that, but another thing to understand is that Georgia is unique in the sense that you, in terms of our state, our representatives and our state senators, you can have people who represent constituents or people who represent them who are both EMC customers and Georgia Power customers. And so there's no fairness going on. There's no balance. So I encourage you, if you do reach out to commissioners, how are they going to work to create balance to ensure that that Georgians, all Georgians, regardless on who their energy provider is getting a fair shot and a fair deal. And I just wanted to lay that out there too. I don't want people just to think it's just Georgia Power. We have to make sure that they have to that they are aware of what's happening outside of that, and that they have to regulate those industries as well.
And I would say, if you're right now, you're thinking, I would love it if we could have a candidate forum in my town, but I'm not sure how that's going to go. And you're a member of a congregation or a community group, you don't have to wait on us either. You can host your own town forums as long as you invite all of the candidates that are running. You can initiate those invitations, and you can invite us to come there and help you host them, or you can get in contact with us. But also, I think part of this is us taking control of the narrative ourselves. You can host these in your town or in your congregation. Just reach out to everybody who's on the ballot, who's running, and ask them to be there.
There's a question here in the chat around, does this also go for Flint Energy? Cody or Andrea, do you have any answer to that?
Is Flint Energy an EMC?
Yeah, very simply, I would just say the Public Service Commission just regulates Georgia's monopoly utility, which is Georgia Power. So that is all that they regulate. Now, that being said, as Andrea talked earlier, the decisions that Georgia Power makes to bring on energy to their grid does affect EMCs, because of a lot of EMCs buy their power from those generating sources. But in terms of regulation, the Georgia Public Service Commission just regulates Georgia Power. And Andre also said earlier, and I will make the remark, that not all, all the people that live in Georgia are Georgia Power customers. Uniquely enough, not a single Georgia Public Service Commissioner is a Georgia Power customer either. So they're also making decisions for Georgia Power bill payers without having to face those impacts themselves.
We would love the NAACP hopefully one, by the way. I see that comment in the chat. There's another question here around, could you speak to the integrated resource process a little more? From the time that the integrated resource plan is presented by Georgia Power to the time that whatever is within that plan is approved. Cody, can you speak a little bit more to the folks about that start and end and what is in between?
I will do my best. So Georgia Power files its IRP sometime in January. That goes before the commission, and then there's a time period where community organizations and other folks can serve as formal interveners. Georgia One's a formal intervener. Georgia Interfaith Power and Light's a formal intervener. I think there's some 20 or 25, 30 interveners altogether. And then on goes a process whereby through 3 sets of hearings. The first one happened in March, where Georgia Power presented their case, and the interveners got to question and cross their witnesses and ask some questions about those proceedings. At the end of May, the interveners will put up their own witnesses and make their arguments, and Georgia Power will get an opportunity to cross those witnesses as well. There'll be a third round of hearings in June that all the parties will come together and kind of make final arguments. And then that recommendation will go before the commission to approve. The real important thing in this process is that the Georgia Public Service Commissioners can do whatever they want to do. Georgia Power has put a plan together and will present it, but the commission can make sure that that plan includes anything. They can make a determination to include a lot more energy efficiency that's there. They can make a determination to say, actually, let's not extend the life of our coal plants and instead let's seek clean energy. They can do that all the way up until the very last minute. And typically that's what happens, is that they will approve a plan and then some commissioners will offer addendum motions. But that's typically how the process runs in its simplest form.
And it would definitely behoove those commissioners with the seats up right now for election to make the decisions that are in the best interest of Georgia residents and constituents. So you showing up, adding that pressure to talk about your bill, to talk about what you're experiencing right now will further drive some of that influence, as Cody and Andrea spoke to before. But other than that, if we have any other questions, we do have time for one more question, if there is one, before we close out with calls to action. If none, okay. Forever hold your peace. Okay, I gave a little bit extra time for those who type slow. But with that being said, thank y'all so much for attending our conversation tonight. There are some calls to action for you that I want to pivot to our speakers to give them time to talk through some items. But the first things that I've heard from our speakers tonight, 1, elections are coming up. The primary is June 17th. And our general is November 4th. We need you to show up at the polls. This is year in and year out for every single community in this work. It's so important that your voice is shown through your vote. We have public commenting coming up. Hearings for the integrated resource plan will begin again at the end of May through June. Show up, pull up, tell them about your bill, tell them about what you're experiencing, and add that pressure to make sure that the PSC is being held accountable for decision-making abilities, for being our leaders in this spaces, for helping us to choose the best route forward for Georgia and for our residents. So please show up to those hearings. We also want you being integrated in this work full stop throughout the year. There's going to be so much that's happening around this election. There's going to be so much happening around this integrated resource plan. You should text Georgia to 79591, and Hip Hop Caucus will keep you plugged in. We're going to let you know what's happening, when it's happening, and how you can show up. You can also follow Hip Hop Caucus on our socials. You can follow our podcast, the coolest show, as well as listen to our radio show, Climate Friday, where I am sure you're going to hear more and more about what is happening here. So handing it all to our panelists. Panelists, how can people find you? What things do you want to plug them into? What actions do you have for them? I'll start off with Cody.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, definitely plug in, because this is the beginning part of the process. You know, we've got the IRP right now. It's going to be followed directly by the rate case. We've got 2 elections this year. We're going to have more elections next year and the year after. So get involved in this and stay in it for the long term. I'm going to post a link in the comments. We're doing a petition that we're going to deliver and put into the formal record at the end of these hearings at gipl.org/IRP action. I'm going to drop that in just a second, but that's the best way to sign up and get the new materials from us.
Thanks, Cody. I'll hand it off to Ricky. Ricky, what do you have for folks? How can they plug in?
I would just say support the folks doing the work year round. That's people like Hip Hop Caucus, of course. That's organizers who are pushing for equity, like WAND, like Cody's organization, like SNAPCO or Snap for Freedom if you're in the city of Atlanta. And also just keeping the conversation going outside of that. So at your barbershop, with your friends, at dinner, around your church, wherever you find community, you should follow with these conversations.
As our fearless CEO and president always says, an organized community is the most powerful community. With that, certainly and not least, I'll hand it over to Andrea. Andrea, how can people plug in, find you, get active?
Well, I encourage you to visit us at Georgia WAND, www.gawand with a D.org. There will be some information on how you can get involved with some of the PSC candidate forums that we would be doing, and then also any type of GOTV work that we would do in terms of getting out the vote, especially in the CSRA areas in the east area of Georgia. Our goal is to increase public participation, and we want to give people reasons to vote. And one of the reasons that you can vote is for policy reform. And so we encourage you, and you go out to speak and go to these forums, or you have meet with candidates, or if you ever have an opportunity to engage, that you ask questions, that you just don't take it at face value, and that you ask them what are they going to do to improve the quality of your life when it comes to energy consumption and resourcing. So I encourage you to be informed. That is my call to action.
Thank you so much, Andrea. All right, y'all. Thank you for being here, and thank you so much to our amazing panelists for your insights and your commitment to this change. I want folks to remember, power isn't given, it's built. And so people like you standing up, demanding better is what builds that power, is what furthers the movement. Thank you so much again. Let's keep building our power every day moving forward. And thank you so much for being in community with us tonight. Bye, y'all.